Dwight Grant's fingers tightened around the smooth plastic of his coffee mug as he stared at the holographic display floating above the mess hall table. The same footage looped over and over a serene human colony world, green and blue like Earth, but with two moons hanging in the coral sky, suddenly erupting into chaos as alien ships descended. "Turn it up," someone said, voice tight with tension. The room fell silent as the news anchor's voice filled the air. Confirmations coming in now. I repeat, we have confirmation that among the casualties in the Novum colony attack was at least one child, deliberately targeted by the alien forces. The mug in Dwight's hand shattered, shards of ceramic and hot coffee spilling across the table. He barely noticed, his eyes fixed on the screen, mind reeling. "That's impossible," he whispered, echoing the sentiment rippling through the room. "What kind of monsters would?" A hand clasped his shoulder. Dwight looked up to see Captain Rivera, her face a mask of controlled fury. "Grant, you're bleeding." Dwight looked down at his hand, noticing for the first time the cuts from the broken mug. The pain felt distant, unimportant. "Sorry, Cap. I'll clean this up." Rivera shook her head. "Don't bother. Report to medical, then gear up. Command's mobilizing everything we've got. Every ship, every pilot." As Dwight stood, legs unsteady, the room around him buzzed with a mixture of shock, grief, and rapidly building anger. Pilots and crew members huddled around displays, some weeping openly, others arguing in heated whispers about what this meant, what would come next. In the corridor outside, Dwight paused, leaning against the cool metal wall. His mind raced, trying to process the unthinkable. He'd signed up to defend Earth and her colonies, expecting to face the unknown dangers of space. But this? The deliberate murder of a child? It seemed impossible that any sentient being, even aliens, could commit such an act. As he made his way to the medical bay, Dwight passed more crews rushing to their stations, their faces set in grim determination. The entire ship hummed with a new energy, not just anger, but a cold, terrible resolve. Dwight didn't have kids of his own, never thought he'd have the time with his career. But in that moment he felt the loss as keenly as if it had been his own flesh and blood. And he knew, with a certainty that chilled him, that this was more than an act of war. It was a line crossed, a point of no return. As a medic patched up his hand, Dwight stared out the viewport at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the aliens who had done this were going about their lives, perhaps congratulating themselves on a successful attack. They had no idea what was coming. Dwight flexed his bandaged hand, feeling the sting of the cuts, using the pain to focus his thoughts. He wasn't a philosopher or a politician. He was a fighter pilot, one of the best, and now he had a job to do. As he headed for the hangar, Dwight's resolve hardened. They would find those responsible, every last one of them, and God help any alien who stood in humanity's way. The unthinkable had happened. Now humanity would show the galaxy the true meaning of retaliation. Dwight Grant stood at rigid attention in the crowded hangar bay, his eyes fixed on the holographic display showing Fleet Grand Marshal MacArthur. The Marshal's weathered face bore the lines of a long career, his eyes burning with a fire that belied his age. He sat in a hover chair, his legs motionless below the knees, a testament to injuries sustained long ago in the cockpit. "Men and women of Earth's combined fleet," MacArthur began, his voice gravelly but strong. "You know why we're here. The unprovoked attack on Novum Colony was bad enough, but the deliberate targeting of a child." He paused, jaw clenching visibly before he continued. "This isn't just an act of war. It's a crime against all sentient life." Dwight felt a ripple of agreement pass through the ranks. His hands clenched at his sides, the bandages on his right hand a reminder of his own shock just days ago. "As we speak," MacArthur continued, "every space-worthy ship Earth has ever produced is being brought online. Mothballed vessels, prototypes, even museum pieces if it can fly and fight, we're using it." The image changed, showing a vast armada assembling in Earth orbit. Dwight's breath caught in his throat. He'd never seen so many ships in one place, not even in simulations. "Your mission is clear," MacArthur said, his gaze seeming to meet each of theirs in turn. Find those responsible. From the lowest soldier to the highest command. They will answer for what they've done. As MacArthur outlined the initial assault plans, Dwight couldn't help but be impressed. Despite his injuries, the Grand Marshal's tactical acumen was razor-sharp. Dwight knew the stories how MacArthur had once been a pilot like himself, how he'd refused cybernetic enhancements after his injury, choosing instead to wear his scars as a badge of honor. The briefing ended, and the hangar erupted into controlled chaos as pilots and crew rushed to their stations. Dwight made his way to his fighter, the sleek SF-22 Raptor that had been his home away from home for years. As he climbed into the cockpit, a hand caught his arm. It was Rivera, her eyes blazing with an intensity Dwight had never seen before. "Watch yourself out there, Grant," she said. "This isn't a training run. These bastards have already shown they don't play by any rules we understand." Dwight nodded, swallowing hard. "We'll show them what happens when you cross that line, Cap." Rivera's grip tightened for a moment, then released. "Damn right we will. Make the Grand Marshal proud. Good hunting." As the canopy lowered, sealing Dwight in the familiar confines of his fighter, he ran through his pre-flight checks. Each switch flipped, each system engaged brought the reality of the situation into sharper focus. He keyed his comm. "Raptor Squad, sound off." One by one, his squadron mates reported in. Their voices were tense, determined. They'd trained together, laughed together, and now they would fight together. "Control. This is Raptor Lead. Squad is green across the board. Ready for launch sequence." "Copy, Raptor Lead. You are cleared for launch. Godspeed." The magnetic catapult engaged, pressing Dwight back into his seat. In a heartbeat, he was flying, bursting out of the hangar and into the star-studded void of space. As his squadron formed up around him, Dwight saw the full might of Earth's Retaliation spread out before him. Ships of every size and description, from nimble fighters to lumbering dreadnoughts, all moving with singular purpose. Dwight's hands tightened on the controls. He thought of Grand Marshal MacArthur, of the sacrifices the man had made and continued to make. If MacArthur could lead them into battle despite his injuries, Dwight would damn well give everything he had to this fight. As the fleet began its jump to the alien system, Dwight allowed himself one last thought of the child whose life had been so senselessly taken. Then he focused on the task ahead. The aliens had started this. Humanity would finish it. The vast silence of space erupted into chaos as humanity's fleet dropped out of FTL. Dwight's hands flew over his controls, his Raptor screaming to life as the alien system materialized around them. "Raptor Squad, form up," Dwight barked into his comm. "We've got boggies incoming, 3 o'clock high." Through his canopy, Dwight could see the alien homeworld, a swirling orb of purple and green, orbited by sleek stations and shipyards. But there was no time to admire the view. Streams of alien fighters poured from the planet's atmosphere, caught off guard but quickly organizing. "This is Grand Marshal MacArthur to all units," the gruff voice came through clear on the command channel. "Remember why we're here. Hit them hard, hit them fast. Show no mercy to their military, but civilian targets are off limits. We're better than them." Dwight's jaw clenched. "Copy that, command. Raptor Squad, weapons free. Let's introduce ourselves." The space between the fleets lit up with weapons fire. Dwight's targeting computer chirped a lock, and he squeezed the trigger. His first shot of the war lanced out, catching an alien fighter square in the engines. It exploded in a silent burst of light and debris. No time to celebrate. Dwight barrel rolled, narrowly avoiding a retaliatory blast. "Watch your 6, Raptor 3, he called out, diving to cover his wingmen. The battle was like nothing from the simulations. The aliens fought with a desperation that bordered on frenzy, their ships pulling maneuvers that should have torn them apart. But for all their ferocity, they were unprepared for the sheer scale of humanity's assault. Dwight's squadron cut through their lines like a hot knife through butter, clearing a path for the heavier ships. In the distance, he could see Earth's dreadnoughts opening fire, their massive guns reducing alien orbital defenses to scrap. "Raptor Lead, this is Control," a voice crackled in his ear. "We're picking up a high-value target. Coordinates incoming. Looks like their flagship." Dwight's eyes narrowed as the data scrolled across his HUD. "Copy that, Control. Raptor Squad, form up on me. We're going hunting." As they pushed deeper into enemy territory, the resistance grew fiercer. Dwight's shield alerts blared as his fighter took hit after hit. He grit his teeth, pushing his Raptor to its limits. Then he saw it a massive vessel, easily twice the size of anything else in the alien fleet. Its hull bristled with weapons, many of them now turning towards Dwight and his squad. "Evasive maneuvers," Dwight shouted, rolling hard to port. Not everyone was so lucky. Raptor 5 disappeared in a ball of fire, struck by a beam that seemed to ignore shields entirely. Anger surged through Dwight, hot and sharp. "Control, that ship's got tech we've never seen before. Request immediate backup." "Copy, Raptor Lead. Reinforcements are inbound. Keep them busy." Dwight allowed himself a grim smile. "With pleasure." What followed was a dance of death. Dwight and his remaining pilots weaved through a storm of enemy fire, their own weapons blazing. They couldn't penetrate the flagship's defenses, but they could sure as hell keep its attention. Minutes stretched like hours. Dwight's arms ached, his throat raw from shouting orders. His Raptor groaned around him, systems failing one by one. Just as he thought they couldn't hold out any longer, new voices filled the calm. "This is Hammer Squadron, coming in hot. Raptor Lead, get clear." Dwight didn't need to be told twice. "Raptors, break off." He pulled away just in time to see a wave of heavy bombers sweep in, unleashing a barrage that lit up space like a newborn star. When the glare faded, the alien flagship was listing, great gouts of atmosphere venting from its wounds. Yeah, Dwight couldn't help but whoop. That's how we do it. As the alien ship began to break apart, Dwight felt a mix of emotions wash over him. Elation at their victory, grief for his lost pilots, and a grim satisfaction that justice was being served. But mostly, as he looked out at the battle still raging around him, Dwight felt resolve. This was only the beginning. They had drawn first blood, but the war was far from over. "Raptor Squad, regroup," he ordered, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. "We've got a lot more work to do." As his battered fighters fell in around him, Dwight set course back towards the main fleet. The aliens had learned an important lesson today, but humanity was just getting started. Dwight Grant stared at his reflection in the locker room mirror, barely recognizing the man looking back at him. 3 months of constant combat had left dark circles under his eyes and new lines etched into his face. He ran a hand through his hair, noticing the flecks of gray that hadn't been there when the war began. "Raptor Lead, report to Briefing Room 3," the intercom crackled, jolting him from his reverie. Dwight sighed, straightening his uniform. Another day, another mission. The initial fury of humanity's assault had given way to a grinding war of attrition. The aliens, despite being caught off guard, had proven to be tenacious opponents. As he made his way through the corridors of the carrier Nemesis, Dwight caught snippets of conversation from passing crew members. "Heard we took outpost Sigma 9 yesterday." "Yeah, but at what cost? Half the strike team didn't make it back." Dwight clenched his jaw. The victories were coming, but slowly, and each one was paid for in blood. The briefing room was already packed when he arrived. Captain Rivera nodded to him as he took his seat. On the main screen, a holographic map of the sector glowed, dotted with red and blue markers representing alien and human forces. "All right, people, listen up," Rivera began, her voice carrying the weight of too many sleepless nights. "We've got new intel on the alien command structure. Seems they're more centralized than we thought. Take out their leadership, and we might just end this war sooner rather than later." A ripple of hope went through the room. Dwight leaned forward, studying the map intently. Rivera continued, outlining a series of strikes aimed at disrupting alien supply lines and command centers. Dwight's squad would be providing air support for ground teams on a particularly crucial mission. As the briefing concluded, Rivera held Dwight back. "How are you holding up, Grant?" Dwight managed a tired smile. "I'm fine, Cap. Just ready for this to be over." Rivera's eyes softened for a moment. aren't we all? Look, I know you've been pushing yourself hard. Don't forget why we're doing this. It's not just about vengeance anymore. Dwight nodded, thinking of the updates they'd received from Earth. The loss of that child had united humanity like never before. New technologies were being developed at an unprecedented rate. Colonies that had once bickered over resources now worked together seamlessly. In a twisted way, the aliens had given humanity a common purpose. Hours later, Dwight sat in his Raptor's cockpit, running through pre-flight checks. His squad had seen so many replacements that he barely knew half the pilots flying with him now. Raptor squad, comms check, he called out, receiving a chorus of acknowledgments. As they launched into the inky blackness of space, Dwight felt the familiar mix of adrenaline and dread. Another battle, another dance with death. The mission started smoothly enough. They provided cover as dropships deposited troops on the alien facility's surface. But things quickly went sideways when unexpected reinforcements arrived. Incoming. 3:00, High Raptor 4's panicked voice cut through the comms. Dwight's instincts kicked in. Evasive maneuvers. Raptors 3 and 5 with me. We'll draw their fire. The rest of you, protect those dropships. What followed was a furious dogfight. Dwight's Raptor screamed through space, weapons blazing. He watched as one of his pilots went down, then another. But slowly, surely, they turned the tide. As the last enemy fighter exploded in a silent burst of light, Dwight allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. Then the reality of their losses hit him. Back on the Nemesis, as he gave his report to Rivera, Dwight felt the weight of command more heavily than ever. "We completed the mission, Cap," he said, his voice hollow. "But we lost half the squad doing it." Rivera nodded, her face a mask of understanding and shared pain. "You did what you had to, Grant. They knew the risks." Later, alone in his quarters, Dwight pulled out a small holoprojector. It displayed an image of the child whose death had started this war. He stared at it, trying to remember why they were fighting, trying to justify the losses. But as he drifted off into an uneasy sleep, Dwight couldn't shake the feeling that this war was changing them all, in ways they might never fully understand. The campaign continued, and humanity pressed on, driven by a mix of vengeance, duty, and the grim determination to see this through to the end, whatever that might be. The briefing room was unusually tense as Dwight took his seat. Fleet Grand Marshal MacArthur's hologram flickered at the front, his weathered face grim. Dwight felt a chill run down his spine for the Marshal to address them directly. This had to be big. "Ladies and gentlemen," MacArthur began, his voice gravelly but clear, "what I'm about to share is classified at the highest level. Our cryptography team has finally cracked the alien command codes." A murmur ran through the assembled officers. Dwight leaned forward, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. "We now know the identity of those directly responsible for the attack on Novum Colony," MacArthur continued. "More importantly, we understand why." The hologram shifted, displaying an alien unlike any Dwight had seen before. Its features were more refined, almost regal. "This is High Commander Corian," MacArthur explained. "He gave the order to attack Novum, including the specific targeting of civilians." Dwight's fists clenched involuntarily. After months of fighting faceless enemies, having a name, a face to associate with their pain was both satisfying and infuriating. But why? Captain Rivera voiced the question on everyone's mind. MacArthur's expression darkened. "It was a test. They wanted to gauge our response, to see how far they could push before we would retaliate. They never expected this." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. All this death, this destruction, born from a cold, calculated experiment. "There's more," MacArthur continued. "Corian and his inner circle believe themselves to be genetically superior, not just to us, but to the majority of their own species. They saw humans as little more than lab rats." Dwight felt a surge of rage, hot and blinding. He thought of every pilot he'd lost, every friend who'd died in this war. All for some alien's twisted science project? MacArthur wasn't finished. "We've pinpointed their central command. It's a heavily fortified space station orbiting their homeworld. That's where we'll find Corian and the others responsible for this war. The hologram changed again, showing a massive, star-shaped structure bristling with defenses. This will be our final push, MacArthur declared. We take this station, we end the war. But make no mistake, this will be our toughest fight yet. As the briefing concluded and mission details were distributed, Dwight remained in his seat, staring at the image of Corian. He barely noticed when Rivera sat down beside him. "Hell of a thing, isn't it?" she said softly. Dwight nodded, his voice tight. "All this time I thought we were fighting monsters. Turns out we're up against something worse. Cold, rational beings who see us as nothing more than test subjects." Rivera placed a hand on his shoulder. "This changes nothing, Grant. We still have a job to do." "Doesn't it?" Though Dwight turned to her, his eyes blazing. "Knowing that child died not out of malice or misunderstanding, but as part of some twisted experiment, it makes me want to." He trailed off, the intensity of his own emotions surprising him. Rivera's grip tightened. "I know. But remember what Marshal MacArthur said when this all started. We're better than them. We have to be." Dwight took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. "You're right. We do this by the book. But Corian and his inner circle? They answer for everything." As they left the briefing room, Dwight's mind raced. The coming battle would be unlike anything they'd faced before. But now, with a clear target and the promise of ending the war, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. In his quarters, preparing for the mission, Dwight looked again at the hollow of the child from Novum. "We know who did this now," he said softly to the image. "And we're coming for them." As he suited up and headed for his Raptor, Dwight felt the eyes of his squad on him. They were looking to him for leadership, for reassurance. He straightened his back, pushed down his anger, and gave them a confident nod. "All right, Raptor Squad," he said, his voice steady. "Let's go make history." The final battle loomed, and with it, the promise of justice long overdue. Dwight's Raptor screamed out of the carrier's launch bay, joining the massive fleet assembling for humanity's final assault. The alien command station loomed ahead, a monstrous construct that dwarfed even the largest human ships. "Raptor Squad, form up," Dwight ordered, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Remember the plan. We're to clear a path for the assault teams." Acknowledgements crackled over the comms as his pilots fell into formation. Dwight allowed himself a moment to take in the scene. Thousands of human ships, from nimble fighters to lumbering dreadnoughts, all united in purpose. It was a sight he never thought he'd see. Fleet Grand Marshal MacArthur's voice cut through the radio chatter. "All units, this is it. The culmination of everything we've fought for. Corian and his inner circle are in that station. Take it down, and we end this war. Good hunting, and Godspeed." The space between the human fleet and the alien station erupted into chaos. Energy beams lanced out, missiles streaked across the void, and fighters from both sides engaged in a deadly dance. Dwight's world narrowed to his cockpit, his instruments, and the stream of information coming through his comms. "Raptors 3 and 4, take out those point defense turrets. 5 and 6, watch our 6. His Raptor dove and weaved through the maelstrom, weapons blazing. An alien fighter exploded under his barrage, the debris narrowly missing his wing. "This is Assault Team Alpha," a voice crackled over the general frequency. "We're pinned down in Sector 7. Need immediate air support." "Copy that, Alpha," Dwight responded. "Raptor Squad on me. We're going in hot." They plunged deeper into the fray, skimming along the station's surface. Dwight's targeting computer beeped a lock, and he unleashed a salvo of missiles. The explosion rocked the station, creating a breach for the assault team to exploit. "Thanks for the assist," Raptor Lead Alpha's commander said. "We're proceeding to the objective." The battle raged on. Dwight lost track of time, lost in the rhythm of combat. His squad took hits, lost members, but pressed on relentlessly. The station's defenses were formidable, but they were slowly, surely giving ground. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the battlefield. Dwight's eyes widened as he saw a section of the station begin to break apart. All units, this is Marshal MacArthur. The command channel burst to life. We've breached their main reactor. The station is going critical. Commence evacuation of our forces immediately. Dwight's heart raced. Raptor squad, you heard the man. Fall back to minimum safe distance. Assault teams, what's your status? This is Alpha, came the response, the sound of weapons fire in the background. We've got Corian cornered, but we're cut off from our extraction point. Without hesitation, Dwight made his decision. Hang tight, Alpha. Raptor squad, with me. We're going in. Ignoring the protests from Fleet Command, Dwight led his remaining pilots back towards the disintegrating station. They weaved through debris fields and pockets of remaining resistance, finally spotting the pinned assault team. Alpha, we're approaching your position. Be ready to move. Dwight and his squad laid down suppressing fire, creating a corridor for the ground troops to reach their dropship. As the last soldier boarded, Dwight caught a glimpse of a figure being dragged aboard alien, regal, unmistakably Corian. Package secured, Alpha's commander confirmed. Let's get the hell out of here. The retreat was a blur of evasive maneuvers and tense moments as the station behind them began to tear itself apart. Dwight's Raptor groaned under the strain, systems flickering as they pushed to outrun the expanding field of destruction. Finally, they cleared the blast radius. Dwight allowed himself a deep breath as he saw the dropship safely dock with a nearby cruiser. This is Fleet Grand Marshal MacArthur to all forces. The comm crackled. The alien command station has been destroyed. Corian is in custody. Stand down from combat status. I repeat, stand down from combat status. A moment of stunned silence fell over the comms, quickly replaced by an eruption of cheers and cries of relief. Dwight sat back in his cockpit, emotions washing over him in waves. Relief, exhaustion, a hint of disbelief. They'd done it. The war was over. As he guided his battered Raptor back to the carrier, Dwight thought of everyone and everything that had led to this moment. The child of Novum Colony, the countless lives lost on both sides, the long months of brutal combat. Raptor lead, this is Control. A voice broke into his reflections. Welcome home and well done. Dwight managed a tired smile. Thank you, Control. Raptor lead coming in. The war was won, but as Dwight looked out at the debris-strewn battlefield, he knew the real work of healing, of moving forward, was just beginning. The memorial garden on Novum Colony was silent save for the soft rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. Dwight Grant stood before a simple stone marker, his dress uniform crisp despite the planet's humidity. The marker bore a name, a date, and a simple inscription: for you, we found justice. Through you, we found unity. It had been 6 months since the destruction of the alien command station and the capture of Corian. 6 months of trials, negotiations, and the slow, painful process of piecing the galaxy back together. Dwight knelt, placing a small token at the base of the marker, a replica of his Raptor fighter, cast in metal salvage from the very ship he'd flown in the final battle. As he stood, he sensed a presence behind him. I thought I might find you here, came the familiar gravelly voice of Fleet Grand Marshal MacArthur. Dwight turned, snapping to attention. Sir. MacArthur waved him off, guiding his hover chair closer to the marker. At ease, Grant. We're both off duty here. For a moment they stood in silence, paying their respects. Do you think it was worth it? Dwight finally asked, voicing the question that had haunted him since the war's end. MacArthur sighed heavily. That's the question, isn't it? We achieved our goal. We brought Corian and his cronies to justice. But at what cost? Dwight nodded, thinking of the friends he'd lost, the nightmares that still plagued him. We're not the same people we were when this started. No, MacArthur agreed. War changes us, for better or worse. But it's what we do with those changes that defines us. They began to walk, or in MacArthur's case, glide through the garden. All around them, Novum Colony was being rebuilt. In the distance, Dwight could see a mix of human and alien workers collaborating on a new building. I never thought I'd see that, Dwight mused, gesturing to the scene. MacArthur followed his gaze. It's a strange universe, Grant. The war brought out the worst in both our species, but in its aftermath, we're seeing the best. They reached a viewpoint overlooking the colony. The scars of war were still visible, but so too were the signs of healing and growth. The peace talks are progressing well, MacArthur continued. Corian's regime has been dismantled. The majority of the alien population, it turns out, were as much victims of their leadership as we were. Dwight absorbed this, feeling a complex mix of emotions. So where does that leave us? Where does it leave me? MacArthur turned to face him fully. That, son, is up to you. Your actions in the war, especially in that final battle, have made you something of a hero. You could write your own ticket politics, if you wanted it, or a cushy administrative post. Dwight shook his head. That's not me, sir. I'm a pilot. I thought you might say that, MacArthur said with a hint of a smile. How do you feel about teaching? Teaching, Dwight asked, surprised. MacArthur nodded. We're establishing a joint flight academy, humans and aliens learning to fly together, to work together. We need instructors who've seen the worst of war and can guide the next generation towards a better future. Dwight fell silent, considering the proposal. He thought of the young pilots he'd led, of the lessons learned in the crucible of combat. Maybe, just maybe, he could use those experiences for something positive. I'd be honored, sir, he said finally. Good man, MacArthur replied, genuine warmth in his voice. Report to the new academy on Proxima Station next month. And Grant? Try to leave some of the ghosts behind. We've got a future to build. As MacArthur moved away, Dwight turned back to the memorial marker. He snapped off a crisp salute. We did it, kid, he said softly. It wasn't pretty, and it wasn't clean, but we did it. Rest easy. Dwight took a deep breath, feeling as if a weight he'd carried for months was finally beginning to lift. The war was over. Justice, in its harsh way, had been served. Now came the hard part, ensuring it never happened again. As he walked away from the garden, Dwight looked up at the sky. Somewhere up there, his Raptor was docked, waiting for its next flight. But for the first time in a long while, that flight wouldn't be into battle. It would be towards a future one he helped shape. The stars twinkled overhead, no longer a battlefield, but a frontier of possibility. Humanity had faced its trial by fire. They had shown the galaxy the meaning of massive retaliation. Now, they would show it the meaning of massive reconstruction. Dwight squared his shoulders and walked on. There was work to be done. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you loved it. Please remember to subscribe if you did like it so you can see more videos like this. And please give us a like and a comment too. I'll see you in the next one.